Growing a B2B agency is stressful as Hey, I'm Sam Dunning, founder over at breakingb2b.com. In this episode, we're going to dive deep into the raw truths of running a B2B service agency, the highs, the lows, the stresses, the wins, and everything in between. I'll share everything I wish I knew before firing up my B2B SEO agency, Breaking B2B, and hopefully there'll be something of use in there for you. With that, let's dive into it. Mine's a bit of a weird one. I used to love gaming. So you might have heard of a game called World of Warcraft. And when I was young, well, I say young, how many years are we going back when I'm 33 at the time of recording now. So maybe through 17 till 21, maybe older, I used to play that game nonstop, like pretty much around the clock. And I was addicted to that game. I used to play that all the time, used to love it. And then got a job at, basically my parents made me get a job, which is fair enough. Staying in the house rent free. So I got a job in a shop called 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗀𝗲, which is a UK camera retail store, selling cameras, video cameras, lenses, and all that good stuff. And I absolutely hated dealing with the general public, which is quite ironic because my wife works in retail. She's a manager at a retail store, but I hated it. Like I would go up to people looking at cameras or lenses or whatever they were looking at in the window and say, "Hi, sir," or "Hi, madam, how can I help you today?" or "How's it going?" And they basically tell me to F off, like tell me to do one. And I couldn't stick that I did that for about a year. And then I was tired. I was frustrated with that. And my cousin said that there was a job going in a web design company. And I said, sounds fun. Like, I want to learn more. So I went to an interview the next day and did the interview. There was only two of them. So there was Tom, my cousin, and Felix, who ran the business. Did the interview. They said, "Yep, you're hired." So I left the camera shop, the retail shop, the next day, and haven't really looked back. So that was the fun part about that. Was I was basically thrown in at the deep end of a small business, or you could call it a startup, and almost a jack of all trades. So went from kind of working in retail to a completely new territory of websites, SEO, digital marketing, and literally got thrown under a bus, really. On day one, I was on sales calls, phoning up leads. In fact, there's a funny story. One of the first leads that I ever called, I closed. So I won, but in a pretty bad way. So basically the prospect was asking for probably one of the biggest websites ever. He wanted a website similar to LinkedIn. And I was just saying yes to everything that he asked for because I had no clue what to do on the sales call. So because I was a noob, right? And he was like, yeah, it needs this platform, this messaging tool, this networking feature, like this advanced feature, and so on and so forth. And I was just like, yeah, that should be okay. Yeah, that should be fine. I ended up selling this massive platform for what was probably the equivalent of, this is probably going back, let's say 10, 11, 12 years. And I think I sold it for like $500, $700 in UK. So $700 in US, which is probably 500 or so in GBP UK. And thank God that guy didn't follow through the idea. He let us eventually ship it off into 2 or 3 smaller websites. So that saved my ass. But yeah, I made so many mistakes, and it was just a great learning curve because I went from knowing nothing about websites to project managing, building wireframes, helping the design and development team, communicating with an offshore team, kind of really, really being thrown at the deep end on sales calls, client calls, project calls, and just learning everything at 100 miles per hour, which I think if you're wanting to get into an industry, like going into a startup or a small business where you are going to be a jack of all trades, is like super good for a learning curve and to gain that hands-on experience in both terms of communication, working on your feet, and putting out fires like 24/7. So that was good fun. I did that for a few years. Then I worked at another marketing agency, which was more fast-paced sales of like phone data and like cell phone data and email data and that kind of stuff. That was a proper like boiler room selling environment. Then I actually was going to join the army. So I was going to join the army. I was kind of knocked web design and SEO and all that kind of stuff on its head for, again, this is probably about 10 years, and then was going to be a paratrooper in the army. That didn't go through because I did the training, got in to the army. Within the first few days, I realized that I didn't like taking orders. So I was like, this is not for me. Like I don't want to be told what to do. And don't get me wrong, I've got huge respect for anyone in the forces, utmost respect, but it wasn't for me. I'm not like running my own business now. I even back then I didn't like being told what to do. So I was like, yeah, this won't work. I'm out. Luckily managed to get out for me and within a few days in. And then from there, went back to this web design agency for some time and eventually became a co-owner of that company 3 or 4 years back. And yeah, essentially learned the ropes really. So in my case, kind of took a deeper interest in growing businesses, in how they worked, in gaining recurring revenue for a business. So in this case, through selling services like SEO and website maintenance, and what kind of services would be valuable to clients and at the same time could grow our business in terms of recurring revenue. And then probably 3-4 years into that, I kind of had enough of running a business with 2 or 3 other guys, which didn't necessarily have the same views as myself. And yeah, so it was, what I should have mentioned as well is before I came back to that web agency and became a co-owner, the last team that I was at, because a lot of this sounds like I'm doing really well, but it didn't. Like I was at that marketing agency where I was selling like cell phone data and B2B mobile data and email data. That company crashed. Pretty much there was various issues with the owner of that business. He kind of went a little AWOL. The company crashed and went into bankruptcy. And then I had nothing at the time. I was coming back from a trip to Thailand and had no job to return to. So I was quite lucky that this web design company kind of took me back with open arms. I worked there as like a marketer and sales rep for a while, and then eventually became a co-owner with 2 other guys. After 2 or 3 years of doing that, it kind of didn't work out as those guys had different visions for the business. And then February of this year, I started Breaking B2B like as a bootstrap founder, and haven't really looked back since. Really, it's quite enjoy it. It's a lot of stress running a business, but there's a lot of upside, a lot of flexibility. And if it's something that if it's a service that's serving an underserved niche and the market has an expensive problem that you fix, then there's usually money to be made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, because we all have to start somewhere. And usually it's at the bottom, right? Because we don't have experience. We've spent time in university or college just learning and adapting, and we get used to those systems. And now we get out into the real world and we have to expand our knowledge. Are we going to, found an organization or go work for a corporation? So I appreciate you kind of just walking through your career journey for listeners today. Can you walk us through what a day in the life of Sam Dunning looks like?
It varies a bit each day, but usually I try and go to the gym in the morning. So once I've helped the wife get the son ready for school, then usually try and go in the gym in the morning, but sometimes afternoon. And then once I've done that, a couple days a week, I'll always set time for prospecting. So whether that, like I said, one of the main things about running a business is keeping a pipeline full of sales opportunities. Like that is literally the lifeblood of business. So whether that is reaching out to some folks on LinkedIn that could be potential clients, or messaging kind of existing contacts, seeing if they've got any referrals, or whether that is even a couple sessions a week doing cold calling to ideal client profiles that I think could be a good fit, or whether that is sending out some email sequences to potential prospects and offering them a video review, in my case, for their SEO or their website. So making sure each week, ideally in the morning time, so it's kind of an eat the frog, get it out of the way, get the horrible task out the way, out the door as early as you can. So usually I try and set some time for that in the morning after maybe a gym session, something like that, and then do some prospecting. Then usually I've got as at the moment, it's my business, but I work with contractors, so I've usually got to do a bit of project management, so make sure our SEO or our website clients' projects are on track. Set a little bit of time probably to do a LinkedIn post. I like to get a LinkedIn post usually around midday, so it goes out to US in the morning, but UK at midday. And then I might, depending on what day it is, I might record a podcast episode, whether that's with a guest, so maybe a B2B marketer that's guesting on the show, or with a potential solo episode for the show. So I might give we run all sorts of solo episodes. So it might be an experiment that I'm running for the business, or a new marketing channel I'm trialing out, or a new tip that I've got for websites, or a new case study or something like that. And then aside from that, it's managing clients. Maybe I'll take the dog for a walk or something like that. And yeah, it's not all upsides though. There's plenty of late nights kind of making sure projects are going well, or if projects are lagging behind, then I might be late night working with the team on Slack or an email to make sure shit gets done. So it's definitely not all, there's plenty of kind of 9, 10, 11, 12 midnight cases where I'm working on projects to make sure the stuff gets done. But then that's what you take on when you found a business.
That's interesting, right? Because I think it's fascinating to hear how people operate in different ways, but there's a lot of commonalities within founders and entrepreneurs where you can kind of see that they have a schedule where they will sort of time block certain elements out, but there's also that nice sense of flexibility, right? Because certain things come up and you've got to be able to adapt and be able to handle those elements that might come up.
Are you tired of competitors ranking above you on Google, stealing traffic, leads, and mind share from dream clients every time they're searching for your services or offers on Google? At Breaking B2B, we fix that with our unusual approach to SEO, content marketing, and websites. We craft B2B SEO strategies and websites for revenue, not vanity. Head over to breakingb2b.com to check our results, pricing, or to book a call with me.
So looking back at your career, what advice would you give your younger self just starting out in sales and digital marketing?
Probably educating myself a bit sooner. So I think but then I didn't know that till I knew that. But yeah, if I could have told myself, then I would have said, well, work on your personal development a bit quicker. So I think most of it was laziness, but then also when I was young, I didn't really care that much and just wanted to do as little as I could to get by. Whereas now I kind of think like investing in yourself is quite powerful in the sense that, especially if you can fine tune that to where you actually want to get to. So whether that is, like we talked about at the start of this recording, listening to folks that have maybe got to where you want in business or got to where you want in marketing or selling or whatever it is you're trying to do, and then tuning into them, reading their stuff, then taking those golden nuggets. But I suppose the important thing is applying it, because not everything that you listen or read is going to work for you. And a lot of the time it's kind of taking that, give it a try, give it a decent test. If it works, great, ramp it up. If not, that's good, because you know that it doesn't work for yourself. You've given it a fair experiment, and now you can move on and try the next thing, really.
You spoke about investing in yourself. For somebody that is new to marketing, right? If they're maybe in the same position you were when you were younger, what resources do you have for those individuals in order for them to sort of ramp up their knowledge on marketing?
Yeah, there's tons, right? I suppose marketing, like my main focus is B2B marketing, and usually tuned into SEO and websites, so it's a bit niche down to B2B. Now, there's tons of resources. I suppose general podcasts, there's a few that I think are quite good. Everybody Hates Marketers by a guy called 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗲𝗀, very good. What else have we got? Tom Hunt runs one. It used to be called, I think it was a Diary of a B2B Entrepreneur, but now it's called, it was Confessions of a B2B Marketer, and now it's Confessions of a B2B Entrepreneur. That's good. 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗲𝗀 stuff I like. A lot of people slate him, but he's done extremely well in business. And I think some of the stuff he says you have to take with a pinch of salt, but I think he does give some solid advice. Yeah, so those are some of the main ones, and there's a bunch of folks on LinkedIn. But I think to get a wholesome perspective, you shouldn't just go after marketing books or marketing podcasts like some of the ones I've shared. You should also look at kind of stuff outside of marketing. So whether that is learning kind of communication, learning human psychology, learning sales, because a lot of sales is around psychology and communication and understanding people and how people work. And people are very strange, myself definitely included. And we don't act rationally by any means. Our emotions pull us to all sides of things. So if you can understand how to communicate effectively, it's super important. So a lot of sales books are great at that. Like we talked about Never Split the Difference, Gap Selling by Keenan, really, really good, understanding the gap between where a prospect is now and where they want to get to, and understanding folks' problems, the impact of the problem and the root cause, and whether a problem is expensive enough that folks want to fix it. So there's a lot of stuff there. And a lot of the time it's kind of dissecting that and trying stuff out for yourself.
You listed so many valuable resources, but then you also do have to go out and test. You have to dive into it. You have to fail. You have to, obviously, the same age-old saying, you have to fail quickly. And then kind of, I think the biggest thing there too is just having that resilience, right? Understanding that you're not going to know it all and you can't. And that's sort of the joy, is going through that process, right? And it's all about the person you become through that process, which I think is important, right? We all started somewhere which wasn't where we are today, right? And I think sometimes there's also key skills that we can develop throughout that process. So from your perspective, especially specifically related to the digital marketing landscape, for college graduates or young professionals, in your opinion, what are top 3 skills that you believe young professionals should develop to be able to succeed in that environment?
As a marketer, the first thing you want to do is niche down. So I would advise you to pick a niche, because if you're going broad, it's somewhat useful to some organizations, but somewhat useful for not that useful for others. So I'd say pick something that's probably a skill that's required by a bunch of organizations. So you're not going after, for example, if we talk about COVID, if you're an events focused marketer or something like that, you would have got slammed once that hit, because all events would have got shut down, and anything to do with field marketing or something like that would have got crushed. So I suppose it's picking something that's relatively niche, where you're not learning SEO, you're not learning paid media, you're not learning LinkedIn ads, you're not learning event marketing, you're not learning like all these different skills that are going to take you years and years to master fully. You're going after something that's going to be required by an organization, whether you're going for a B2B company, a SaaS company, a tech company, whatever, but is not going to be limiting yourself, just like the example of events marketing. So I suppose I often say go where the money is, which is a bit of a financial bias term, but if it's something that you can get enjoyment out of, that part of that skill set you're going to enjoy, and it's going to be required. So if you are trying to be an in-house marketer, or if you're trying to market for a brand, think about something that you're going to get joy out of, whether it's an SEO whether it's working on SEO campaigns, whether it's going to be working on socials, whether that's going to be paid media, or whether that's going to be, I don't know, something completely different. And then think, is this, like on the job market right now, if I'm trying to go down the route of getting hired, is this something I can see on job boards that folks are actively recruiting for? Is it something that is actually getting decent pay? So is there demand out for it? Are they willing to pay for it? Because if not, it might be that you might want to kind of rethink that. And then the other thing is, I suppose, getting stuck in. And like you've heard from my journey, I started from not knowing anything to pretty much throwing myself in the deep end. So I think if you can go somewhere where it is a bit of a startup or similar, and a lot of folks that have grown kind of big businesses have told me similar stuff, and you might not necessarily get the best pay from day one, but if you can go somewhere where you're going to learn those skills through folks that are way smarter than you, that are doing tasks, or are at a management level that you're trying to get to, and if you can be around those people, that's going to be really, really useful, because then you're gonna learn each day on the job. You might not get as much cash as you want from day one, but you're going to pick up the skills, be it hard skills, actual tactically, how to do a certain marketing channel, a certain marketing strategy, but soft skills, communication, talking to people, running meetings, whatever. I think that's probably useful.
Something that you touched on was, you'll grow those skills over time. And I think it's all about applying yourself to situations or maybe opportunities where you might not be experienced in an area, and then you will become experienced over time, but you won't gain that knowledge without putting yourself in those situations to maybe take on more, even when you're not getting paid to take on that extra element,
Yeah, and I think if you can, even if like throwing yourself in a startup, I don't think there's much better, just because you are going to get thrown under a bus, but you're going to be forced to learn on your feet. But also, if you can work on something yourself that's kind of vaguely related to where you want to get to, so whether that is firing up your own podcast that you do in your own time, where you maybe interview folks that are in position you want to get to, so in my case, marketing leaders or entrepreneurs or business owners, whatever, Or maybe you start your own, maybe you just start posting content on LinkedIn because you're trying to build an audience there. Or maybe you start a small email newsletter that kind of gives useful tips for around the industry you're trying to break through, or something like that. If you can build that, like, that is such a fast feedback loop, such a useful skill to be able to build something yourself, see it through, grow it, learn from others, and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's going to help you a lot as well. And also that's valuable to employers. Like, if you can say, look, I've built this off my own back, and I've grown it from zero to this. If someone's a respectable marketer and they say, well, this person's actually kind of got off their ass, done this on top of all the other work they're doing, like, that's commendable.
Yeah, and it shows that hard work and determination, right? Like, you're willing to put in that sweat equity to see something through long term as well, right? Also, it's like when you go to college or university, it's that, yes, you're educating yourself, but you're also showing that you can apply yourself to something for, 4+ years and see it through and ultimately graduate and, achieve that award in a sense. And there's a couple elements, that you touched on as you're going through that entrepreneur founder journey. There's a lot of ups and downs, right? And there are moments where you might feel like giving up. And I think that is really relevant, especially in this day and age with a lot of the mental health awareness elements that are going on during your process. I'm sure, as to, with everybody else, there's moments where we feel like we want to give up. Can you walk us through a moment where maybe there was a time in your life where you felt like giving up, but then also what kept you going, right? Like, how did you push through that moment so that the listeners today can maybe learn from that period of time in your life?
I suppose I've been fairly fortunate that I've never had stuff devastating happen to me. Like, the most devastating thing that's probably happened to me, although it didn't feel that devastating at the time, like, I've been outside of work when I was maybe 20, 19 years old, when I was back at the start of that story, when I was working in the camera shop, our house burnt down. So me, my dad, and also my uncle and auntie were living in the same house at the time. Like, we lived in a thatched cottage. So I don't know if the whole roof was thatched. We had an inside wood burner with an open fire. And the funny thing was, the open fire and the chimney had been recently serviced. So it should never have happened. But yeah, that was a funny time, because at the time my dad was dealing with terrible depression. So whilst the fire was a bad thing in the sense that it burnt the house, it forced my dad to move out of the house. So it was actually a really good, it was almost like a blessing. Like, I'd almost say it was an act of God, that it's kind of caused him to go from a terrible state of depression to moving out and about and seeing people and all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't so much directed on me, but it was good for my family. But from a business standpoint, I mean, there's down, especially when you're running a business, like, there's ups and downs all the time, right? Like, I get on proper downers when this sounds minute compared to what else is going on in the world, but when I lose projects, and when things don't go well, or when I thought there was a kind of potential client that we were going to work with, a prospective deal, and it doesn't land, like, it sometimes really, really gets me down. Like, there's only last week where we had two projects where clients had asked for agreements to go ahead, and then kind of a day later they'd said, oh, we're actually not going ahead with you. In fact, I had one that said we weren't going ahead with me because of my poor grammar on email. And I'm one of those people that writes how I talk, which, as you'll see, when you work with kind of busy B2B execs, especially in the C-suite, their spelling and their grammar is terrible, and they write super fast emails. So that's kind of how my mindset. So in the end, it was funny, because I went from a downer at the end of, I think this was 2 weeks ago, I was on a proper downer, because everything had gone south at the end of that week. Like, all these projects I thought were coming in, and even through the weekend, I was feeling down. Like, it just kept going through my head, like, what should I have done differently? And then I thought, well, if these sometimes those things are a blessing, because it's like, if a prospect is saying that they don't like your spelling as a reason not to work with you, and like one grammatical error in an email, that's raising red flags. And then luckily early the next week, you got some new kind of prospective calls booked with prospective clients. So it's ups and downs, right? And it's riding the waves, but you've got to want the end goal. So especially when you're a founder of a business, like, there's going to be so many ups and downs, a lot worse than that. And that's part of it. And whether that is kind of setting dedicated time blocks to do some prospecting, to reach out to the network, to post content, to cold call, whatever it is, you've got to realize that there will be stuff that you don't like doing that much. But if you want to get to your business to a point in which you want to get it to, it doesn't come without some graft and some harder work. And it's not necessarily hard work making calls or taping messages. It's more just graft or a grind, really.
You touch on an element there, right, where you have to have that perseverance to push through. But at the same time, I think it's important to take that time, right, to experience and feel that frustration, those moments of doubt, or, you know, when you're ticked off about something. And like to your point way earlier, is, you know, step aside, go to the gym, take the dog for a walk or whatever it might be, release that pressure and then come back to it. But know that ultimately that persistence and that continuous effort is what's going to ultimately help you see success in the end.
It's one of those things, isn't it? I think a guy called Josh Braun, you might know on LinkedIn, he posts some great stuff on LinkedIn actually. And he usually says, like, if something doesn't go right, a meeting goes badly, a project goes badly, you lose a sale, whatever, kick rocks for a while, take time out, rant about it to your friends for an hour or two. Don't reply to emails, because that's the worst thing you can do. And then the next day kind of move forward. And I think that's the best outlook, really. Just take some time out, because otherwise it's going to impact everything. If you're trying to do stuff straight after that, you're going to be in a bad mood. And then you need to then push forward. You can't, as much as it is easy to just elaborate on stuff, and I've done it many times, you've got to think, well, what can we do now to push things forward and take the next step towards where I want to get to, which is sometimes easier said than done.
Definitely takes a lot of hard work. But if someone, you know, is in university or college right now, right, and they sort of want to build a similar career trajectory to yours, right? Obviously, you know, starting out at smaller jobs as they go through their studies, and then kind of growing into either sales or digital marketing or marketing in and of itself, and then eventually maybe break out and become a founder, such as yourself, right? Like, where should they focus their energy early on in order to see that outcome?
Yeah, pretty much do the opposite of what I did. Don't hop around from 10 different careers to then eventually realize that you want to sell SEO and be a marketer and create content, all that good stuff. I suppose if you can, which is easier said than done, especially when you're young. And I know there's a lot of smart young folks now that are super good entrepreneurs, and I respect it. So I suppose it's, if you can fine tune it. I mean, right now there's a lot of good opportunity in the tech world. So if you can find a decent tech or SaaS company and start a funded startup as a sales development rep on the phones, trying to book meetings, or if you can start as a marketer there, I think that's going to be a good growth loop for you if you'd want to go down that route, which is more kind of my space. Because I think if you can be around people that are kind of 1 up, 2 up from where you want to be, and that is kind of a career you think would be worthwhile, and you can listen to those guys, see what they're doing well, and it's a really fast feedback loop to see what works and learn from people maybe 1 or 2 notches ahead of you, and kind of get where you want to go. And then, like we talked about earlier, if you can start building something slowly yourself. So if you think, like, in a couple of years I want to get to this level, whether that is building your own podcast, or maybe once you're more experienced in the field of marketing you're in, or the field of sales you're in, maybe you pick up some consulting clients on the side. Or maybe you do what I did, like build a podcast, start posting on LinkedIn, start posting on YouTube, and then kind of slowly build awareness around, I actually do this consulting stuff, pick up some clients slowly, gradually on the side. Maybe you do some projects at a low cost to target clients for free, or well, not necessarily free, but you might do it at a low cost at a starter rate to begin with, to get some testimonials, to get some case studies, get some validation, some proof of results, and then you slowly ramp that up on the side, consult for those or do small projects for those, and then maybe eventually build out something that you want to do yourself once you've kind of tested if you like freelancing or if you like consulting. So it's rarely that you can do one path, but that's probably a little bit better than the route I took.
I think that's brilliant, you know, and I appreciate that advice, because you've been through everything you've been through, and you have the opportunity to have hindsight and look back and see, you know, maybe for somebody else, what are certain elements I could adjust or help somebody else kind of speed up that process, right? And I think that's the best element of learning from those who've kind of walked the path before you, right? So I appreciate you sharing your advice there. And, oftentimes when people are starting something new or they want to break into an industry, there's fear associated with it, right? So do you have any sort of advice for anybody who's afraid to take risks early in their career because they're scared of failure?
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, I was apprehensive about starting this business, Breaking B2B, even though I was a co-owner in another business before, but I had two other directors, right? So there was three co-owners of the business, so it was never solely me. And so even though I'd been an owner of a business for 3 or so years, and I had my own podcast show, and I had some consulting clients, I was still scared. I was like, what if it crashes? Like, what if I don't pick up some new customers for this business? What if everyone hates the brand name? Like, what if things don't pick up? Like, always thinking of the worst case scenario, when the truth was it was the best thing I've ever done. And on the basis that, because I'd acquired those skills in my case, like I'd learned how to sell, I'd learned kind of the fundamentals of marketing. In my case, picked a niche. So in my case, I'd realized through running my own podcast, through running the business, that I wanted to tune down to kind of working with B2B and SaaS companies and tech companies. That was the niche that I wanted to serve. So in my case, I had all the tools. It was more just, I think in the end, it was like my wife pushing me and a couple of friends saying, like, you really need to get out and start your own thing. And sometimes in my case, I had to hear it from other people before I kind of just fired it up. So yeah, there will definitely be doubt. But I think the smart thing to do, and not everyone's done this, maybe I'm a bit more conservative, is prove the concept first. So like we talked about, if you are already doing a full-time job, be it marketing, be it sales, be it something else, do it on the side for a bit, prove that you can do it, prove that you actually like doing it, prove that you enjoy it, prove that you can make some money off it, save up a bit of cash like I did, and then that way you give yourself a bit of a runway. And what's the worst that can happen? Like, absolute worst case, the business doesn't succeed, fine, go back to a corporate job or whatever job you were doing before. That's literally the worst case, which is no different to what you're doing before, so it isn't worst case.
Oftentimes when people try to break out and start their own something, whatever it might be, they always focus on all of the negative, right? What can go wrong? I'm not good enough, all the self-doubt talk or the negative talk, but we don't focus enough on what could be, right? Like you have gone through sort of, like you touched on, the prove the concept, right? Plug yourself into an industry that you want to break into, whether it be marketing, sales, a product, anything, and then gain that knowledge and that experience, and then ultimately step out once you've been able to become the master, right? Then you can step out on your own and kind of expand into that industry. But look at the positive side. I think so many of us focus on the negative when we could be focusing on the positive, right? And I think it's sort of that element of the mindset shift comes before the income shift. You have to work on your mind and be able to take that risk and step out and just seize that moment, which a lot of people are nervous to do, right? And I think it's a lot more people should take the risk and the chance and bet on themselves.
Yeah, I agree. I think at the same time, don't go into it too lightheartedly, in the sense that realize that it won't be a walk in the park in most cases. So realize that if you are bootstrapping this yourself, then one, like we talked about, get the experience, be able to deliver on whatever product or service or offering it is you say you can deliver. So hopefully maybe you've done some freelancing stuff or consulting stuff, whatever. Then realize that you're going to have to acquire clients. So maybe you take some of your clients that you were freelancing on the side or consulting on the side, then you start hitting up your network, and ideally start to chip away at building some kind of audience. So then you're not starting in completely fresh. So if you're in B2B, that's probably creating content on LinkedIn, or maybe that's having a podcast that's relevant to your niche and your industry, or maybe that's having a YouTube channel or a small email list. So that way you're not going entirely fresh. And then you can start hitting up people that are part of that audience for recommendations, referrals, and realize that a lot of it at the start, on the basis that you can deliver a project or you can deliver a product or a service, is going to be generating business. So you're going to have those skills, which goes back to the start of this episode around sales, because that's the lifeblood of business, right? You're going to be able to have to promote yourself and close business. And if you can't, then you're not going to have a business. So realize that that is going to be a big part of it, and then being able to deliver, which you probably can already.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say then that final key piece is definitely that follow up, follow through on what you say that you're going to do, and make sure that it's to the best of your abilities to kind of keep that recurring clientele. Well, awesome. Sam, thank you so much. I appreciate you spending your time with us. I know it's very valuable, and I appreciate you sharing your words of wisdom with our listeners today.
No, I appreciate having me on, Wade. I'm still learning, but hopefully some of this was useful to learn from some of the mistakes that I've made over the years.
Your career journey is very exceptional, and I think there's a lot of people that currently are in situations where they don't know where to turn to, right? So hearing your advice and your knowledge and your tips it's definitely going to help somebody out there in order to help find their path, or maybe even recorrect their path, right? So I appreciate you spending time with us.
And there we have it. A big shout out to the Underdog Rising podcast for having me on. And if you want to join thousands of B2B legends enjoying my weekday newsletter for unusual B2B marketing tips, SEO ideas, case studies, as well as fresh podcast updates, head over to breakingb2b.com and hit the newsletter tab. And with that, I should catch you on the next one. Cheers.